Hey, this is Andy Andrews, the author of The Traveler's Gift. And if you really want to learn how to level up your life, you should be listening to the Time to Shine Today podcast with my good friend Scott Ferguson. Let's level up.
Are you ready to level up? Do you wish to live a life of options and not obligations? You've come to the right place. Thank you for stopping on by to hear knowledge nuggets from Coach Fergie and his top tier guest to help you lean into your ultimate human potential. Now, let's level up with Coach Fergie.
Hey, Time to Shine Today podcast, Varsity Squad. Welcome back to another powerful edition of Time to Shine Today podcast. I'm your host, Coach Fergie, blessed to be your gap coach, specializing in peak performance, mental conditioning, working with business leaders, entrepreneurs, entertainers, athletes, C-suite, and students to help them bridge their success gap to live a life of options and not obligations. On this platform, we are stoked to bring you high performers who are not just chasing and attaining success, but redefining it through providing above and beyond service. And thank you, Squad, for making us the top 2% podcast globally, and that's according to Listen Notes. So thank you so much for listening and providing content to us and ideas and whatnot. A really quick coaching knowledge nugget that I want to go through with you out there, Squad. But there's a power most people never tap into because they're too distracted, too emotional, or too locked into their own stories to even see it. It's the power of noticing. Noticing isn't passive. It's not sitting back and hoping clarity magically shows up. It's a discipline. It's a weapon. It's training your mind to detach from the noise, strip away the drama, and actually see what's real. Most people don't fail because they can't do the work. They fail because they miss the small tells, the patterns, the opportunities, the habits that are creeping in, the warning signs, the moments that would change everything if they just paid attention. I had a coaching client recently, absolutely beast of a human. He plays for the NFL. I'll just say that. But he kept getting stuck in the same loop. Every session he told me the story of why things weren't changing. And finally I hit him with it. You're telling me everything you feel, but you're not noticing anything you're doing. Once he slowed down, detached from the emotion, and started noticing the real data of his life, his decisions, his habits, his tone, his body language, the people he was letting influence him, everything shifted. Not because he worked harder, but because he saw clearer. When you truly notice, you gain leverage. You gain control. You go from reacting to responding. You stop being a passenger and you take the darn wheel. So here's today's challenge for you, Varsity Squad. Don't just go through your day. Notice your day. Notice your patterns. Notice the moments where you check out or where you rise up. Notice the opportunities hiding in plain sight because your mindset was too loud to see them yesterday. Your next level of your life rarely requires more force. It requires more awareness, and awareness is where it starts noticing. And talk about, and I use that, Squad, noticing, because I consider him a good friend. I just met him 5 minutes ago. He's someone that had a huge impact on my life. He wrote a book called The Noticer, which was one of my top 5 books that sits on my bookshelf. And I'm bringing you a legend whose fingerprints are all over modern personal development, world leadership, elite performance, and the very way we think. This is a man whose words have reshaped families, corporations, military strategy, small businesses, and yes, millions of lives across 40 languages and more than 20 million books sold. I'm talking about Andy Andrews. Andy isn't just an author. He's the mind behind the Noticer series, the writer who delivered the modern day classic, The Traveler's Gift. That is my biggest gifted book that I ever give out. A book, Good Morning America, called one of the 5 books you should read in your lifetime. Not this year, in your lifetime. Actually, read it today. His book, The Bottom of the Pool, was named by Forbes as one of the 7 books every entrepreneur should read. And Book Authority declared The Little Things the best work-life balance book of all time. His words have reached 4 U.S. presidents, the United States Congress, and for 8 years, he served as an advisor to the U.S. Special Operations Command, my brethren out there. Recently, he was tapped to deliver a live multi-service course on critical thinking for leaders of the Army, Air Force, Space Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and command leaders from 16 allied nations. There are levels to this game, and Andy sits in a strategic territory very few touch. Zig Ziglar, the man himself, said Andy Andrews is the best speaker he's ever seen, and that is huge. And he's also a funny Christian comedian, so he likes to really get after it. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming on. Please introduce yourself to the Time to Shine Today podcast, Varsity Squad. But first, real quick, what's your favorite color and why?
My favorite color, Scott, is, man, I got several favorite colors, I think. But my favorite color is probably red.
Red? Very good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the color of candied apples. It's the colors of cars I don't drive.
Right.
I think red seems happy to me. Red seems passionate to me. And so red always attracts my attention.
Roger that. So your background, yourself, going back to before, is there any of David Ponder in you, anything that you might have lived through? Because it seems so real. Like we talked off mic about me writing my parable, if you will, hero story. A lot of it's me, which I told you that. Is there any of Ponder in you from
Oh, yeah.
before? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of it. And as at the first of the noticer story, that first chapter is totally true. My parents died when I was 19, and my mom died of cancer. My dad was killed in a car accident. And so crazy time, as you can imagine. But I've always had the ability to take a bad situation and make it worse. And boy, I did. And things got really rough. And I lived for a couple of years under a pier on the Gulf Coast and in and out of people's garages in the wintertime.
Really? You did that?
Yeah, it was a
Wow.
crazy time. And so those were that was and this was before internet, before cell phones. And so a lot of people had left school and I left, I didn't quit. You know, when you quit, you sign stuff and you tell people,
You
I just
just left.
left.
You bailed
And
out, right?
so I was in college at the time, and when I left, people kind of went nuts, and friends and family members. My parents were the only two people because I left school right before my mom died. And my parents were the only people that were like, okay, just you got to do something. What are you going to do? And my dad was always the kind who's like, if you end up digging ditches, just dig good ones. I'll be proud of you. I'll bring my friends to show the ditches my boy dug.
Love
And
that.
but the other people in my life were not quite so supporting. I had friends whose parents forbid them to be around me because I was a bad example, having
Wow.
left college.
Right.
And so when I did end up, people were like, you're going to ruin your life. And so at the point I ended up under a pier, I didn't want to call anybody and go, hey, you were right. I've ruined my life. And so can you help
Here
me?
I am.
So I
Right.
just didn't tell anybody.
Okay.
And so I just toughed it out on the Gulf Coast and met this old guy late one night under my pier. And we call him the noticer. We called him Jones,
I
but
would
he
say
said,
just Jones. Just Jones.
yeah, just Jones. No, Mr. Jones, just Jones. And he would say, when God passed out talents, I didn't get the cool ones. I can't run fast. I can't sing great, but I notice little things that make a big difference in people's lives. And so this is the guy who told me the truth about myself during the toughest time at that point in my life.
Yeah. How receptive were you to it in that moment? Because you were still either a late teenager or early 20s, right?
Yeah. I think about that. That's a good question because I was not overly receptive. I was just desperate.
Right.
I
Neither
was
was the
not over,
character in the book either, Andy. Like he wasn't
yeah.
at first. Okay.
And I was just in a situation where this old man was the only guy paying any attention to me at all. And as as angry as I was, and that's a curious thing because people ask me a lot of times, they say, when you were living under the pier, were you sad? And no, I wasn't sad. Were you depressed? No, not really. I was just mad. I was angry all the time.
Wow.
And if you said at what, I'd say kind of everything. I was mad at my dad for not wearing a seatbelt. I was mad at my mom for whatever she did to get cancer. I was mad at
Sure.
God for letting it all happen. I was just
Right.
mad.
Right.
And so he really took me and shaped me. And one of the things he did was started me reading. I had never really been that much of a reader. I was more of a Sports Illustrated, Field and Stream kind of guy.
Right there with you. Yeah.
And so he got me started reading biographies.
Okay.
And I eventually read over 200 of them there before venturing out.
Sure.
And in those 200 biographies, I found 7 things that all these people had in common. And I didn't even really know what to call them at the time. I just call them things. I
Mm,
knew they weren't habits. I knew they weren't characteristics. They weren't ideas. They weren't even mine. These were just things I recognized and identified. But it was curious to me that it seemed that 2 or 3 of them were always actively used by these people. Now there were 7. When you read 200 biographies, that's a pretty broad stroke to carry. But when I would see 2 or 3 evident in their lives, and then 2 or 3 evident in somebody else's life, I got the idea that I wasn't finding anybody that I knew that had all 7. Or wait a minute. I wouldn't find it anybody that knew they had all seven.
Roger that.
They all
Okay.
had all
Right.
seven. It was just that I'm not sure that all of these people had identified all seven. They just kind of naturally acclimated themselves to several of them, but they really harnessed two or three.
Right.
And so I got to thinking, what happens to somebody who knows all seven? What happens to a life that understands all seven? What happens to a child whose parents know all seven of these things? And what happens to that kid? And so I began to really apply those seven in my life. And that's ultimately how I got out from under the pier. And those seven things, which now we know they're principles, there were seven
Sure.
principles. And those seven things became the basis of the story for The Traveler's Gift, which is a story about a family going through a tough time, and the dad gets to travel through time, meeting with seven historical figures who are also going through a tough moment at that time. He gets to be with Truman, and while Truman's determining how to end the war, what to
Right.
do with this bomb that only he knows about. He gets to be with Anne Frank in the annex and talk with her. Gets to be with King Solomon
Yeah.
right after he says, "Bring me the sword and I'll tell you whose baby this is." And each of these seven people give this man a separate principle that if he puts it in his life, things will change. So
Right.
that's the story. And that's really kind of the origin story of how I found those seven principles.
And the character development behind even and when you mentioned Joshua Chamberlain, I was like, I knew that name from. I'm probably one of the few that actually knew who he was. Right,
Yeah,
a
I'll
school
bet.
teacher that went through, and I'm like, and then there was actually a show, Andy, that was on in the late tens, early teens, 2010, called Homeland, and they were at, and the main character brought his kids there, and he told them about Joshua Chamberlain. I was like, "There's where did this guy get this from?" It was Homeland. It was a huge show on Showtime. I liked it.
Yeah, yeah, I remember the
Military kind
show.
of
I never
base.
watched it, but I
Yeah,
remember the
and he
show.
talks about Joshua Chamberlain. So that's two things ever in my life that I've seen with regards to that. But digging into those characters, I mean, I understand. Give them hell, Harry. That's the responsibility, the ability to respond to the situation that he was in.
Of
But
course, you know what he said about that. That's what they called him.
right,
Give him hell, Harry.
yes,
And of
sir.
course, he said, "I never give anybody hell. I just tell them the truth, and they think it's
They
hell."
think it's hell. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. So, how about when you picked? I understand the Anne Frank, but where did that kind of come from? Like, where did she's happy? I understand that, but to go from the happiness, because happiness is probably one of the things that, for me, anyways, writing, I could probably find a lot of examples. But how did you
Right.
land on Anne Frank? I've always wanted
Well,
to ask you that.
because I wanted to, and looking back on the book's in its 21st anniversary, and
Wow.
when I look back at the book, maybe happiness wasn't the best phrase
Right.
to choose. I think maybe I would choose to be grateful would probably
Love
have
that.
been a better thing. I give myself a break knowing that Anne Frank, in describing her happiness, is really telling a story of gratefulness. And
100%.
and I
Yeah.
wanted to use her because I think that there's a lot of people that you could choose that a modern person could look at and go, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess they can be happy, but look at me." But I couldn't find anybody that showed happiness and joy in as tough a circumstance as
True.
Anne Frank. And
Right.
so that one, that was one of really two
Right.
slam dunks. The rest of them I had to really struggle over a little bit.
No, it was great how you picked them out from Abe Lincoln, and the Gabriel, the angel. It was just you pulled everything full circle because the way that I thought the book was going to end, I was like, wait a minute. Then you just kept going. It's like one of those movies you think is going to end, and it just keeps going. That's where it was genius, and I see why it's sold and why it's picked up and why I refer it out to so many people. So
Thank you.
you've advise presidents, special operators. What personal standard do you walk in that lets you operate at that level without flinching? Because I'm going to tell you, like, if this was back in the day, we would see you walk in and we'd be like, he's not us. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you do it? Because I'm brought in. Okay, I've dealt with imposter syndrome. I'm up in front of 1,000 people and I'm like, oh my gosh, they could be CEOs and C-suites, and most of them can spec me with their wallet, right? What are they going to get from me? But I was pulled aside and said, listen, attach you're attaching your confidence to your abilities instead of attaching. I was asked by someone I respect immensely. A speaker said, Fergie, what's your intention today? My intention is to have one person out of there walk out with something that's going to help them level up their life. He goes, that's it, lean into that. So I attach my intentions to my confidence, and now I shine. At least I feel I do. I get good feedback, but then I get out there. It's a lot easier for me to get through it. So how were you able to walk? I mean, this is the president of the United States. Come on, man. And these are also guys that are the elite of the elite. How do you do it without flinching?
One thing I do is what you just did there with me. You would think that you would go into a situation just spouting your accolades and what you've done to try to convince them that that you're the person to be there at the time. But what you did with me just then, you said, now I shine, or at
Right.
least I think I do. And that makes you a lot more human to me and to
Yeah.
your listeners and viewers. And one of the things that I do that I think that I really think connects with people like that is I treat them like nobody else. And
Unpack that. What do you mean by that?
the bigger the person, the more I tease them, and
Oh, I get it.
and I
Yeah.
I kind of mess with them a little bit, and I'm big on smiling while you're talking. And so when it's one of the greatest pieces of advice I could give your audience is learn to smile while you talk. Not smile a lot, not smile every time you see somebody, but
Right.
smile while you talk. And that's not looking like a bozo the clown. That's just getting your eyebrows up, getting your countenance up, getting the edges of your mouth up
Sure.
instead of down, getting your eyes into a more optimistic frame rather than because a lot of times people tell jokes and you look at them and they look angry. And then they get to the punchline, then they laugh, then they look angry again. And so it's something that I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I was sitting next to Nick Saban at an event one time, and Nick and I worked with him off and on, and Nick is very intense, as you already know.
Yes, sir.
And we were sitting next to each other at this event, and somebody on stage was saying, and Nick Saban's here today, and he has created this dynasty, and these guys never lose, and they're da 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 da, and he's just going on and on. And I hear Nick beside me go, "Oh God!" And so I look at him, and I kind of lean over and I say, "You don't like it when they do that?" He looks at me and he says, "It just makes what I do harder."
Harder. Yes.
And
Sure.
I said, there is something that you can do and you wouldn't have to experience this kind of thing. He said, what? And I said,
Lose.
just lose 3 or 4 games a year. I said, they won't bother you. And he goes,
Yeah, I see it. Nick just moved into the neighborhood next door.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good. I
Or
love
just
it.
depending. No, he didn't laugh. He just kind of rolled his eyes and smiled,
That's right.
But I went into a real serious situation one time where a person we all know, they wouldn't even tell me what was going on before I got there. And so when I get there, and I've signed all this non-disclosure
Sure.
stuff about saying who it was and everything. And I get there, we talked a little bit, and he says, I guess I just need to tell you. And I said, okay. And he said, we're having marital problems.
Okay.
And I said, I knew that. I knew that. And he said, how could you have possibly known we were having marital problems? And I said, you're married. And when we are married, those are the kind of problems we
Sure.
have.
Love that.
And he just kind of relaxed at that point and laughed. And so sometimes stating the obvious, sometimes treating people like
Yeah.
nobody ever treats them anymore.
I'm
But
blessed.
everybody knows what it's like to be treated normally, but then some of us, you and I among them,
Mhm.
we get a bit of visibility, and people start treating us differently.
Right.
And that can be the beginning of the end for some people because
Yes.
you know what it's like. Somebody will come up and go, "Hey, is your juice okay? Is your juice the right temperature?
Right.
Is there anything else we can do for you?" And some people turn into this kind of, as a matter of fact, my juice is not okay.
Right.
Just, whoa, where did you come from?
Right.
So I think a lot of times treating people the
What's
way
kept you humble?
everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
my wife, my boys, my friends,
Yeah.
and even talking about the traveler's gift, I think it foremost in my mind more than almost more than what Good Morning America said about that book being one of the 5 books you should read in your lifetime. One of the foremost, probably the foremost thing in my mind about that book is that I couldn't get it published.
Wow.
When I wrote the manuscript, I thought it was pretty good. And everybody that writes is told, okay, expect rejection, get good at it, and all like that. But the Traveler's Gift was turned down by 51 different publishers. And so when you think about that, you think about a book that now a national news organization is saying it's one of the best, one of the 5 best books you should read in your lifetime. But in reality, 51 publishers said what was put on this paper was not worth being printed. And
Right.
so it it's a humbling thought that
That
I
rejection.
could because and it's why I believe that a lot of the best music and the best writing is probably in somebody's drawer somewhere
Oh my
because
gosh.
they
Yes.
did it and somebody said, "Yeah," and
Yes.
they go, "Yeah, okay." And they put it away. And and for whatever reason, well, I know the reason. The seventh decision was I will persist without exception. And if I hadn't written that stupid part, the book probably would have
No,
never been
thank
published.
you. Yeah, it brought everything circled back. That's it, it nailed it. And Squad, I got to tell you, the seven decisions we talked about is the buck stops here. Adversity is preparation for greatness. Second is I will seek wisdom. I will choose my friends with care. Third is I am a person of action. I can make decisions and I will make it now. Fourth is I have decided heart. My destiny is assured. Today I will choose, or fifth is I will choose to be happy. Choose to be happy. I'm the possessor of a grateful heart. Six, I will eat this day with a forgiving spirit. Forgive people. And also, most of all, forgive yourself. And remember, forgiveness is nothing more than giving up the hope of a better past. Okay, forgive yourself and forgive others. And seventh is I will persist without exception. I will find a way where there is no way. And with you circling that fully back, it made sense for Ponder's situation, right? To
Yeah.
wake up into the next day and persist. Because I always say, I stole it from Napoleon Hill, back your faith with a perseverance that doesn't recognize failure. If we're going to fail, we fail forward. I'm from Detroit. Detroit Lions best running back to me is Barry Sanders ever, and he lost the most
I
yards.
agree with you on
Thank
that.
you.
I agree with
Thank,
you on
thank
that.
you.
I sent an Instagram to my oldest son yesterday of Barry Sanders just running clips, and I sent it with the very best.
Yes,
He was the
yes,
best.
yeah, he was. And when I was there, when I got out of the military as a personal trainer, I actually personal trained Lauren Sanders, his first wife. And so it's pretty cool. He would come in and I get to rap with him. This is back in 1997, right before he decided to hang him up.
Wow.
Way too early. But it was pretty cool to see him every day and stuff. And the thing is, he still does so much for Detroit, and which is pretty cool. But thank you for agreeing with that. But he would fail, he'd fail forward. He always fell forward,
Yeah.
and then he'd break that big run. So, Andy, if you could give people one daily question to sharpen their critical thinking and level up their life, what do you feel that would be? What is that one question that you think that people need to hit themselves with? And this is selfish because I've always wanted to ask you this, man, because I'm a big question person. I believe our minds are programmed to problem solve. You can say affirmations all you want, but questions to me, I'll take an affirmation and put it in the form of a question. So my subconscious, reticular activating system, blah, 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 all that stuff is going. But what question, man, should we
I
ask?
agree because I think the quality of our answers is determined by the quality of our questions.
Yes, sir.
Don't get answers, ask good questions.
Right.
And because mainly we're talking about asking questions of ourselves, not asking questions of others. And I think my number one question that I would recommend people asking myself or asking themselves is it's an overall that you can apply to specifics. But the overall way of putting it is, do I believe everything I think?
Oh,
Am I believing everything I think? And here's why I pose it that way, and let me explain it. The old man, Jones, the noticer,
yes, sir.
said to me one time, he said, "You got to remember, you can't believe everything you think." That it seemed that was it went over my head, but it was odd. And so I kind of kept remembering it and unpacking it. And and here's the best way I can explain it. Have you ever known something, you knew it, and
Right.
you could argue it and you could win the argument every time?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then 6 months later, a year later, you found out, oh, that was not exactly right.
Yes,
Or, oh,
sir.
my information was a
Absolutely.
little incomplete. Okay,
Absolutely.
so if you've ever done that before, does the possibility exist that something you know now, your information might be incomplete? And
Oh
you
my
would
God.
say, Andy, of course, something
Yeah.
I know now, my information might be incomplete or totally wrong. Of course. Okay, I agree. But the point is, we don't know what that is.
Right.
We don't know what that subject, we don't know how many subjects that may cover in your life.
Sure.
And so to not believe everything you think, there's a misconception about, especially about personal growth. And I think that when they feel like they've reached an answer, let's put it this way. The misconception is when people are not performing to their potential, they feel like there's something they're missing. And that applies to corporations, it applies to teams.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, we're not performing our potential. There's something we're missing here. And so I would argue that it's not something that you're missing, because when there's something you don't know, you keep looking. You
Yes.
keep searching, you keep
Yes.
Googling, you keep questioning, you keep listening, you keep
Thank
having
you.
conversations. And so I don't think the biggest danger to reaching our potential is something we don't know. I think the biggest danger to reaching our potential is what we know for sure.
Yes.
Because
Oh,
when we know something for sure, we tend to lock that in place and just go off and look for other things that
right.
we're not sure of.
Sure.
And yet, how many things do we have to be proven that somebody be absolutely sure about? Face masks, vaccines
Sure.
that turn out to be not really so accurate.
Right.
And so when what if we were still today, everybody face masking? What if we were still today vaccinating everybody because that's what we had decided?
Right.
And so there's so many explanations of that. There's so many examples of that. It's odd to me that people can get locked in so easily. But I will tell you this, the more successful a person or more successful a company or a team is, the more likely they are to believe what they think.
Right.
Because they're looking at their industry and
right.
they're in first place.
Right.
And so
They'll
how
stall their
much better
growth if
could I
they
do?
keep that thinking up because the people will pass them by. And it's with my clients, I don't care if you're the CEO, manager that I'm blessed to coach. I have protocol that must be to me by 9 a.m. their time. And it's three things you're grateful for, your intention for the day, an act of service you provided yesterday, and something you've learned. And with that fourth one, with something you learned, there's a few more that I do add on if I feel they need it, but that's something they've learned is requirement. That I try to keep them out exactly what you just said. It stalls their growth if they think they know everything.
Right.
And Andy, you and I, which I hope to meet you one day, I'm going to make it a point to meet you one day. And we'll talk about maybe some of these questions, 15, 20 minutes over a cup of coffee or something like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
But today, you got 5 seconds with no explanations, and I promise you they can all be answered that way. You ready to level up?
Yeah.
All right. Andy, what is the best leveling up advice you've ever received?
Don't believe everything you think.
Love that. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Reading the Bible and praying first thing in the morning.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Other than The Traveler's Gift or a plethora of your other books, what book helped shape you that someone else? If you saw me walking
Um,
down the street, like when I see someone glum, I am the traveler's gift. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But is there a book that just switched you around?
Yeah, The Old Man and the Boy.
Okay.
The Old Man and the Boy. Most people hadn't heard of that. It was written before I was born. It's by
Okay.
Robert Rourke.
Okay.
And if you're an outdoor person like you and I are, Scott, you'll especially like that book. I think it turned my relationships into a deeper, more understanding way with my boys. And it's my favorite book of all time.
Donnie, write that down, please. Thank you, brother. When you text, do you use any emojis?
No.
Okay. Nicknames growing up.
Ange.
Ange, awesome. You have any hidden talents or superpowers that nobody knows about until now?
Yes.
What is it?
You said I didn't have to explain.
Got it. No problem. Chess, checkers, or Monopoly?
Chess.
Okay.
No, checkers. Checkers. Checkers.
Checkers is so much
Did
easier.
I get that under the line?
You got it, brother.
Okay,
You got it.
all right.
Headline for your life.
Andy Andrews. He was trying till the very end.
Love it. I love it. Go-to ice cream flavor.
Peppermint.
Love it. Last question. You can elaborate a little bit on this one, but how do you want your dash remembered? That little line in between your incarnation date and your expiration date, your life date and death date. How do you want that dash remembered? Hopefully it's way down the line because this world needs you, but how do you want your dash remembered?
I want it to be remembered as a good dad, good husband, good friend, a caring, helping person.
Right.
That was able to explain some things.
It's
like a long answer, but
no, with this one, it's allowed. But
my prayer every day is, God, help me understand some things you want your people to understand. That if they did understand, they'd live the life you want them to live.
Wow. Okay.
And give me simple ways to explain complicated things that are confusing people. That's my prayer. That's part of my prayers every day.
Amazing. Be able to, yes. Because sometimes I call it affectionately dumbing something down so like people can understand it. Because I get really into it. Like you, I'm an active reader, like just really, and I just envelop stuff. But sometimes when I put it out and I'm speaking I'll go to a local Toastmasters just to try a new bit. And they'll be like, dude, I didn't understand any of that. I had to bring it down for them to understand what I was getting at.
Right.
So I love that. So, Andy, tell us about Wisdom Harbor. So I know it's passionate to you, actually.
WisdomHarbor.com is a web portal, a streaming service, an extremely cheap streaming service, I might add.
Sure.
Just with everything going on today, or inexpensive, however you put it. But our stated goal is to create America's next greatest generation by creating conversations with adults and young people.
Love that.
So this is going into schools and some businesses, a lot of organizations, a lot of families use Wisdom Harbor. Harbors always have docks. And so there are I think 21 docks in Wisdom Harbor, and these docks are incredibly varied. It's the Bet You Didn't Know dock, the In Other Words dock, the Just for Fun dock, the How Do I dock, the audiobooks dock, musicians dock, writers dock. And so small lessons are delivered in interesting and funny ways by our board of contributors. And our contributors include Grammy winners, coaches, comedians, teachers, singers. And so these people deliver probably 75% of what's on Wisdom Harbor is video. So it's 6 to 8 minute video pieces. And then the rest of it's divided up between audio and written word. And they're divided into docs, but on the thing, they're also divided into categories like history, English, culinary arts. We have a couple of chefs that are contributors on here. And there is something for everybody, but the main thrust of it is to tell stories that people never knew. To me, the most interesting things in history are not in the books. They're not in the history books at school. And it's probably why I was not interested in history when I was in school. It just bored the heck out of me, memorizing dates.
Sure. Right.
And so if I'd have had a history teacher that had come in and said, today, I'm going to tell you a story.
Yes.
It's true.
His story. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is Wisdom Harbor is full of stories that you've never heard that create conversations at the dinner table, that
Yes.
create conversations in classrooms, that create conversations between adults at the ballpark and kids that are not their kids. And so if you look at how the greatest generation occurred, and by the way, I'm not sure that who we call the greatest generation should be called the greatest generation.
I understand. Yeah.
I think that title probably should go to their parents and
Yeah.
their teachers and the adults in the community at that time, because how did they raise an entire generation of kids by
Mm.
a standard that we look back 80 years later and say that's still the best we ever were?
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is
Darn
taking,
Tom Brokaw.
yeah, he's the one who named them.
Right.
And so but I guess that with Wisdom Harbor, it brings together this curiosity,
Love it.
and so I would love for you. I'll make sure you have a subscription to this as soon as we're
Yeah.
off the air.
I
But
appreciate that. Yeah.
I really would urge people to dig into that. It's like, is it $27 a year, Matt? $27 a year.
Beautiful.
And that's for 365 days a year, 24 hours a day.
Wow.
And on Wednesdays and Saturdays, the content barge arrives. And so the new content
Videos,
arrives in
whatnot.
Wisdom
Nice.
Harbor. And so you get an email with it, you get a text with it. It has an app for your phone if you want
Wow.
to use it on the app or use it at the computer. But they're very cool, very interesting.
Very
And
nice.
and so there are a lot of people that involve themselves in providing that for their schools.
Right.
As we know, schools are having a tough time. So we price it as low as we possibly can and
Sure.
still stay in business, 27 a month. And so there's a way to sponsor your whole school.
Love
And
that.
for a year and sponsor an entire junior high school or a middle school or a senior high school. And so we have a lot of people doing that are
Right.
involving themselves in that.
Love it. And squad, it is wisdomharbor.com. That's wisdom and then HARBOUR.com. I'm going to put it in the show notes below. And Andy, do me one last solid, please, because I know your time's limited, but leave us with one last knowledge nugget that we can take with us, internalize, and take action on.
Okay. And how about this one? There is not just hope for a greater tomorrow. There is a proof of hope that you can tag into. And that the proof of hope actually stands on the understanding that everybody has a worse time in their life.
Sure.
Everybody has one. If you look at a timeline, the lifeline from birth to death, we could figure out, okay, that right there, that was the worst time in their life. Everybody has one. And the other curious fact about that is it's rarely the last thing in their life. Very rarely it's the last thing in their life.
Right.
And so this proof of hope actually hangs on the fact that you can have a worst time of your life in the middle of your life. And so here's what it is, that even in the worst time of your life, there is the proof that things will get better, a proof of hope. And that proof of hope is that you are still breathing, that you're still
Yes.
here. Because if you're still here, that means you haven't accomplished what you were put here to do.
Right.
If you haven't accomplished what you were put here to do, that means your very purpose for being on this earth has not yet been fulfilled.
Right.
If your purpose hadn't been fulfilled, that means that the best part of your life, the most incredible part of your life,
Still
the
coming.
most purposeful part of your life is still ahead of you.
Yeah.
And so that is proof that there's more laughter, there's more success to earn, there's more influence to come to bear, there's more children to teach, there's more friends to help. There is more proven by the understanding that you sit here and breathe. You're
I
still
love
here.
that. I love it. And squad, we've taken up a lot of Andy's time. I have notes upon notes. He said when God passed out talents, he didn't really get the good ones, but he didn't let it stop him. He taught me that you can try to treat people that are on a pedestal like nobody else will, respectfully. But if you can get them to smile, curl those lips, That really works. It really get through. Smile while you talk. Don't just walk around big grin, but actually smile. If you've watched this video on YouTube or Vimeo, Andy, when he's talking, he's actually smiling, which I was catching him out of the corner of my eye, which I thought was really cool. He lives a life where persistence, he backs up his faith and his desire with a persistence that doesn't recognize failure. He wants you to ask, do I believe everything I think? A lot of people listen to themselves too much instead of talking to themselves and really asking themselves powerful questions. A fear is a lot of people have is not performing to their potential. It's not something that you are missing. It's something that can be found and just keep going. He will be remembered as a good dad, husband, friend, and a world changer to millions. Sorry, but he will. I'll put that out there for him. He's planting trees he's never going to sit in the shade of, right, squad? And he does things for the intention, not the attention. You don't see him leaning on Lambos and doing all this. Look at me. He's actually putting out Wisdom Harbor that is so affordable, which I will put that again in the show notes. Go join. I'm joining as soon as I get off of here. I can't believe I haven't joined yet. And also, stories, they stick with us. Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth I'll believe. Tell me a good story and it stays in my heart forever. And that's the kind of stuff that Andy leans into and gives us those stories. And then the proof of a greater tomorrow. I know I've survived 100% of my worst days. I have. I promise you, squad, and so have you. So with that hope, you can grow. Your best days are still ahead of you. And Andy, thank you so much for coming on. You level up your health. You level up your wealth. You're just so gracious with your time. You've earned your varsity squad letter here at Time to Shine today. Thank you so much for coming on, brother. I absolutely love your guts, and I mean that.
Awesome, man. I am honored to have been with you. Thank you. And your listeners are fortunate to have you.
Thank you, brother. Chat soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Time to Shine Today, proudly brought to you by Inlet Properties and Investments. If you are a business owner or professional who would like to be interviewed on the Time to Shine Today podcast, please visit timetoshinetoday.com/guest. If you'd like this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. There's a link in the show notes to our website. Also, there you will see our recommended resources. We hope you will help support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have been listening to, it'd be great if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe while you're at it. I'm your host, Scott Ferguson, and until next time, let's level up. It's your time to shine.